Welcome to the Somatic Movement Summit, a free online event where you'll learn from leading experts how to embody all of yourself through the medicine of movement. Share this powerful program with your friends and family, and come join us on Facebook at The Shift Network. And now your host, Gayatri Shriefer.
Welcome, everyone. I'm so happy that you're joining us here today, and I'm excited to introduce to you our special guest, Jasmine Lamba. And Jasmine is the creator of SomaSensing and a registered somatic movement educator. Jasmine's work is intuitive somatic therapy that works for chronic pain and healing trauma through the body. Jasmine, it's a great pleasure that I'm welcoming you here today.
It's so wonderful to be here with you, Gayatri. I'm really looking forward to our session together.
So am I. So Jasmine, let's dive right into it. And please tell me, how did you enter the field of somatic work?
Well, this practice of coming to sensory awareness was not something that I was searching for. It happened spontaneously. And the way it happened was through a mentor of mine, my Pilates teacher at the time, and this was in 2003. And I was kind of struggling to figure out what she meant about tuning in. You know, I came from a fitness background. I was so body aware. But as we know, there's such a difference between body awareness and embodied awareness, right? So, you know, one of the practices that we explore is how to release the diaphragm. And so I was kind of, figuring this out and tuning in and, the body is a container. And I felt the spontaneous release, that's the best way I can describe it. And in that moment, there was an inner knowing. I can only describe it as an inner knowing, as if a textbook of what I was reading had happened in a moment. That's how I can describe the wisdom of sensory awareness. It's so quick. And that release was the first time I experienced my somatic wisdom or the sensory awareness. And what I can only describe as, prior to that, a feeling of being numb within. So that's what started this curiosity with this inner landscape of the body.
That sounds wonderful. So a new world opened there inside of you. So can you, because now, many years later, you have developed your own body of work. Can you speak a little bit about your work and how that is, how is that a somatic practice?
So the way that I would describe it is an intuitive practice that has emerged. And that's just the magic of sensory awareness. I can only describe it as an emerging practice. And the way that SomaSensing helps people is that it's a practice that resets the inner rhythm of the nervous system. And when that happens, it helps to resolve trauma. It is revitalizing to our connective tissue or fascia. And these movements that are self-revitalizing help to reduce inflammation. They help to restore suppleness within the tissue. They help us, most importantly, to reconnect with this sensory awareness. And what I found is that there's an implicit repatterning of our movement and kind of an experience as well. So I often say to people, it's like you're creating a new pathway or a new habit of being in resonance within the body. So if I were to summarize, it is a practice that helps to revitalize our fascial tissue. It resets the inner rhythm of the nervous system. It reconnects us to our true nature, our soma, and it repatterns habitual pathways. So that's really the practice. And the way that it does that, Gayatri, is that there are these emerging blueprints, embodied blueprints. One of them, most somatic practitioners know this, especially if you're teaching somatics, is pandiculation. But the way that it emerged for me was a little different. I started to notice kind of this expand release sensation that would happen as I was moving with the ground or away from the ground. And we know that we can initiate movement from our extremities, our hands and our feet. So this kind of sensation of expansion, and I would call it expand release. And that's what began to happen. And then kind of rocking, soothing motion, rocking to self-soothe is the way I could describe it, coaxing movements. And they were movements that was the body's way of taking care of itself.
Wow, that is music to my somatic ears. So you are speaking about when our soma, our mind body is waking up and we are starting to self-soothe. And that is quite amazing, actually, to activate, or I don't know what to call it exactly, that innate intelligence. When that takes over, when our somatic intelligence starts to lead us, that is quite a special state to be in. And you were speaking about being in resonance within our own bodies. And to me, that is just so, I would say, juicy. Let's just spend a little more time on that. So resonance, to me, everything is resonance. So what does it mean to be in resonance in your body?
That's such a great question. Resonance as a felt sense. So yes, resonance, because what we've been discovering about fascia, and fascia researchers are talking about not only billions of neurons that are embedded within this fascial matrix, within our connective tissue, and apparently there are 250 billion. So Robert Schleip, one of the teachers that I have been following, has been talking about discovering more and more of that. So that's part of the nervous system. But then you have, part of that is interoceptive awareness, which we'll come to. Then you have electromagnetic resonance, there could be biophotons or light. But it's still emerging. The research is still emerging. So in SomaSensing, the way that I would describe resonance is when the body's feeling revitalized. There's a kind of buoyancy and a lightness to it. We wake up with this energy, with a body that feels effortless, with little stiffness there. There's not any, it feels hydrated is probably the word I would describe in its physical quality. And then there's this layer of feeling at one with nature. Part of resonance is this feeling at one. At the heart of it lies connection. So when we are in resonance, we have this connection with ourselves and we are able to connect with other very easily. The word compassion comes to mind. The word holding space comes to mind when we're in resonance. We're able to hold space. For me, what happens is that when I'm in tune, when my body is attuned, I start to sing. Sometimes I hum. If I'm going shopping and I have a bag with me, I might be swinging my bag. I just have this spontaneous play that emerges from within. And often, if I'm in nature and there's a tree, I have this urge to climb a tree. So look, it doesn't happen every day. Of course, our nervous system can fluctuate, our resonance can fluctuate. But with SomaSensing, when we are cultivating this intuitive practice and we're attuning the body, we're likely to find resonance and joy. It's just joy.
Resonance and finding a joy and compassion. It sounds like a wonderful place to be in. And you were speaking about connection. And for me, the extension of everything you said, or what I resonate with that, is wholeness. So really coming into wholeness within ourselves. And you were saying it's easier when we're in self-connection, of course, to connect to others. So just returning to a very rich and awake state is what it sounds like when I'm listening to you. So Jasmine, you were already mentioned the word interoception. What is that?
So interoception is the body's way of sending us information from within. And the easiest way to describe it is that urge to pee, or the feeling of thirst or hunger. And we often link those to the body being in needing to come to homeostasis. So interoceptive signals allow us to come into homeostasis, not only in our body physiology, but in our emotional state as well. So we don't often link interoceptive awareness with our emotional state. We are more and more now than we have been, say 10 years ago. And if we explore those signals that happen when we feel nervous or when we're in love, that butterflies in the tummy sensation, the heart racing, the dry mouth, those are all interoceptive physiological signals from within the body. And there is a neuroscientist or neuroanatomist by the name of Dr. Bud Craig. There are many that talk about interoception. And he spent 30 years, looking at this nerve ending, which is an interoceptor, and where it travels to in the brain. So what he discovered, or what others like him have discovered, is these nerve endings, which are free nerve endings. They are slower in responding. They travel to a certain part of the brain, to the insula or the insular cortex. Pain signals, nociceptors, are interoceptors as well. We don't often think of those as a signal arising from within the body. So pain signals, especially chronic pain signals. So by the time we have chronic pain, we refer to that as distressed interoception. A panic attack, heart palpitations are referred to as distressed interoception. So we want to quieten those loud signals so that the pathway that goes to the insular cortex can help us to connect with empathy or better choice making. It helps us to connect with our self-awareness, our consciousness, our embodied experience. So interoception is that. It's the signals that emerge from within. And in SomaSensing, what the practice does is it helps to calm distress signals. So it helps to quieten the noise. And noise can happen with our self-talk. It can happen in so many ways, right? It doesn't have to be external noise. It can be internal noise. So it's calming those loud signals. So it allows the body to self-adjust, self-tune, and provide other possibilities, whether it's life choices or whether it's movement choices, whether it's intuition. So interoception is that.
Thank you for your very clear answer there, Jasmine. And we very commonly in our field of work, we are speaking about proprioception. So how is that different to interoception?
That's such a great question. And of course, we use both. So I just want to say that off the bat. It's not like we use one and the other. But more and more somatic practices are incorporating this tuning in, our inner awareness. So proprioception is associated with the body in space. That's how it's described. But what it really means is our awareness of body orientation. And we're propriocepting all the time. Otherwise we wouldn't, it's our motor skill. We wouldn't able to walk well, or even, go down a flight of stairs or balance. So proprioception are those nerve endings that sense body position, the weight of our body, the orientation of our body, and the balance. So all of those are linked to for the body to adjust in space. And often in somatic practice, we guide people through a proprioceptive practice, which is really useful if someone is in distress, anxiety, and experiencing these loud signals. You can take them to a proprioceptive feedback. For example, the way the body makes contact with the ground if they're lying on the ground. So it's that sensory feedback, the physical information, the heaviness of the body with the ground. And in standing, it could be the placement of the feet, what they can feel, what parts of the feet touch the ground, what don't touch the ground, the pressure, the weight distribution. Those are all proprioceptive signals. There's this kinesthetic sense of the body. And with interoception, you're also allowing yourself to tune into the inner container and the inner landscape of your body. And so you're kind of working with both. But for me in SomaSensing, it's the interoceptive awareness, the guiding someone to tune in and allow them to self-adjust, to find where it feels soft, for example, that softness, that sensation of release or space. So it's that self-adjusting ability, tuning in to self-adjust. So that's the difference, really, for me.
Tuning in to self-adjust. And so let's think a little bit about the topic for your session, which is how interoception guides intuition. Now, you've already mentioned these words, but not in one sentence. So let's speak a little bit about what is intuition to you and what is important in order to build or strengthen or ignite our ability to have an intuitive sense.
So the way that I would describe intuition from a SomaSensing perspective is to discover what's already there. There's an inner knowing. It's as if the body knows where it wants to move to next. And in my workshops and courses, I describe the sensation of movement, intuitive movement, as being guided versus guiding. So how are we able to access that? And it's interoceptive awareness that helps us to find or to listen to intuition. Because if there's loud signals, you're not really allowing yourself to listen to the body's way of guiding you to what's required in that moment. So there's that one part. And from a movement perspective, there are innate patterns, instinctual patterns, and that the intuitive self helps us to find those emerging blueprints. Pandiculation is one example. A self-soothing motion is intuitive, right? So if you are holding a baby, what's our intuitive what's the intuitive thing that we do? We start to rock or we'll pat to self-soothe. So self-soothing is intuitive. And if you want to know the science of it, this is my take, that if nerve endings like interoceptors, and I'm not dismissing the other resonance fields like electromagnetic or light energy or any of those, our energetic body in resonance, seems to go to the part of the brain that not only helps us to find clarity. So that's often what people share with me, is if they find that they feel like they are like clarity is emerging. This word clarity comes up. But somehow when we are quiet, and notice I'm using the word quiet and not still, because the body's always, always listening and resonating. It's never completely still, right? So when we tune in and find that quiet within, there seems to be an emergence of a possibility. So intuition is where, if I'm sitting in a particular position, I'll give you a really easy example. So say we're sitting here and I'm tuning in and I'm noticing that, I'm feeling a little bit stiff in this part of my body or in the neck area. Often we might, just drop the neck to one side. Okay, so that's not intuition. It's just like, it's an outer sensation of, I just need to pull this neck a little. Okay, there's an inner sensation. So what I often teach is for people to pause and rest and wait. And in that resting moment, the body starts to find its own way. The body finds a way of taking care of itself. And you're meeting it. And it's that meeting of these dimensions where intuition emerges, or it's always there. I started by saying it's always there. It's always there. What we're cultivating is to listen to that. And that's the easiest practice I can give you in terms of intuitive movement, is to stay quiet and listen to where the body feels stiff and find spontaneous movement. That's the other word that I would describe. There's an emergence of spontaneous movements where you're not having to think about it. It's just there and it emerges spontaneously. So that encompasses what I call intuition.
Wow. Very interesting to speak about how we can remember how to self-sense and with that ignite our intuitive sense, how we can really practice that by just making use of our somatic feedback. And in some ways, it's so obvious, it's right there, but we actually very rarely speak about it in these terms. So I'm really enjoying this, Jasmine. And you were also speaking about bringing down the noise, because I'm well aware of that. When there's a lot of internal noise, whether it's a lot of mental activity or very, very strong emotions, or if there's, for example, very strong physical sensations like pain, it can be very difficult to pick up on the nuances, on the sort of more subtler elements. So what can someone do when the noise is loud? How do we turn down the noise?
Well, there's nothing like the body and the somatic practice to bring us into the present moment. And there are neuropsychologists like Norman Farb and Catherine Kerr who talk about body sensation as the best way to cultivate mindfulness. And mindfulness is taking that moment to pause. So yes, when someone's in chronic pain, I know that I've had mindfulness practices where talk about, to just be with it. So I have a different approach. And we go back to that first point that I made at the start of our conversation, which was to reset the inner rhythm of the nervous system. So pain is a signal that the nervous system is in dysregulation, right? So to quieten that loud signal, you want to calm the nervous system. And the movements in SomaSensing do that. So the first step is we have the body. We're not just listening to the body is in motion. It's either rocking from side to self-soothe. There's a bit of a body bounce to release the pain. Or if it's on the floor, you're finding ways to self-soothe. Now, it's not a practice where I would just say to someone, lie there and find it. Of course, there's a guidance, because that's the purpose of becoming a somatic therapist in this intuitive way, is to hold space for that person. So someone with chronic pain would need to learn how to access their inner resource. And what I do, or what people who are certified in this practice do, is guide others to find their inner resource. So we're holding space, and once they have this access to their inner resource, they themselves would know how to reset their inner rhythm through these self-soothing movements. And I mean, pandiculation is the easiest one. And in SomaSensing, I use it in different ways. So not quite like somatics, although it comes from the same, I mean, it's in all of us, right? But to move the body in a way that will elicit a spontaneous expansion, because we know that in pandiculation, it is that release of oxytocin, the release of oxytocin that calms and soothes the inflammation. So there's been research around that, and it's not just oxytocin, there's serotonin. And if you take the body's own emerging movement, like pandiculation, you're working with wholeness.
Yeah. And Jasmine, before we continue on that very important track, can you just speak a little more to clarify what is pandiculation? Because this can sound like a very strange just sound to someone who doesn't know what a pandiculation is.
Yeah, it is a strange sound, right? It still is. And I call it a body yawn. So it's not like a yawn, but it's that early morning urge that we have when we've been stiff and sleeping for a long period of time. It's that urge that happens from within, right? So a pandiculation is what I call a body yawn or nature stretch, right? It's very different to a fitness stretch or a yoga stretch. And it's not even quite a stretch, but for the purpose of understanding the sensation, I call it nature stretch. And there is an emergence, a sensation of expansion. So we begin with as if the body has taken this air in and keeping that air in. So it's keeping the body in this, maybe you would call it an integrity or a stability or whatever you want to describe that second phase. And then there's an unwinding sensation. The body's finding areas that are a little stiff or, taking care of the fascial tissue that's a little stiff. And at the end of that pandiculation, the third phase is the sigh. And it's between that yawn and the sigh, the expansion and the release, that we're softening the stiffness in the tissue. And that sigh is brilliant for releasing the diaphragm. And this is how we improve breathing. So instead of breathing breath techniques that I've taught before mechanically, this practice in my body has been amazing for my own diaphragm, all the diaphragms of the body, actually, the pelvic diaphragm, the breathing diaphragm, we have a thoracic outlet, the cranial diaphragm, that expansion. So that's what I call pandiculation. And in layman's terms, a body yawn, nature stretch, and there's the expand, there's a pause, and then there's the sigh. That sigh is where we release oxytocin. And there's a couple of papers on that.
Wonderful, Jasmine. And what we can say about pandiculation, also the natural occurrence of a pandiculation, most of us know from seeing pets or animals after they have been confined or sleeping, resting. They're going to get up and they're going to stretch one way and then the other. We can think about a cat or a dog. Most of us know what that looks like. And it's a sign of health, right? When we start to self-pandiculate again, that's really is a sign that we are returning to our natural, more somatic state. Would you say that is it true, Jasmine, according to you as well?
Absolutely. absolutely that. And you can feel it, as somatic movers, our self-practice lies at the heart of how we help people. And yes, animals do that. Dogs and cats, all mammals pandiculate. They don't go to a tree and stretch, or, the way that we do. They follow nature's way. And coming back to your question about, is it a sign of us returning or restoring to well-being? Yes. And what I often find is that when people first start to pandiculate, they may not find that pattern. And that is a sign of, somatic amnesia or sensory amnesia. There's a numbing of sensory awareness. So being able to tune into that instinctual pattern is the first way of restoring well-being of our wholeness. So it's a whole practice, body and mind, and spirit.
Yes, it really is. And I'm just remembering myself when we are talking about this. So when I'm stressed, or if I have deadlines, when I wake up in the morning, I do not self-pandiculate. I get up to the alarm. I just rise out of bed and get up. But when I am more somatically attuned, then I may wake up without an alarm, and I'm going to start stretching a bit. And my body has that intuitive sense, just wanting to move and sense and stretch. I think most of us know that feeling. So there's a vast difference between the aliveness of that self-pandiculation, of that intuitive knowing, allowing our interoception to guide us, versus being in that, what were you calling it? Somatic amnesia, or what was the word?
It's sensory amnesia.
Yeah, exactly. So it's really, I think it's so important that we remember that it's such a profound benefit of moving from a somatic awake place in ourselves, and that it may seem like such a small difference, but it makes all the change in life, I would say. So Jasmine, please tell us a little bit about what has your somatic practice offered you in life? What has it, what are the benefits for you with a somatic practice? What has changed in your life after you entered the world of somatic?
Everything. I've changed over the years. And something else that has changed is when I'm moving this way, I can't move any other way. When you find nature's design and this felt experience of oneness and wholeness, it's difficult to go back to my fitness days, or even yoga, yoga asana. So that's the movement practice has changed. My connection with myself and the ability to listen and to know and to cultivate that inner knowing. So we all have that. We all have the ability to listen within. So when the possibilities emerge from the insular cortex, I'm kind of going back to the neuroscience of it. So when we're in interoceptive awareness and we're in quiet, inspiration emerges. That's something else that happens. People talk about, I used to be someone who would talk about motivation and being goal-driven and all of those active states that's just always busy and on the go, to feeling quiet and calm and finding a sense of purpose and meaning. And one of the most obvious changes that happened was in the way that I felt the clothing on my body. I can't wear anything that's restrictive. I never wear heels now, which I used to. It sounds really obvious or simple, but that's what changes. And the change has been implicit. I would find myself being different many months or years down the line. So that's changed. And one of the most important aspects of this intuitive way is to be guided by the truth that emerges from within. For example, there may be a difficult decision that we are sometimes faced with. And we often go with what feels easy, or we avoid what's going to be difficult. And yet our intuition is saying to us, whether it's a relationship or whatever it could be, we hold on with fear onto things or situations or relationships or not knowing how to navigate ourselves. But this helps us to find possibility, the language, the relationship from truth. And even when it means that the inner wisdom is guiding us to make a decision, our intuition, we can choose something that's difficult, knowing that it'll be difficult, but it's the right choice. So making the right choice, even though it might be difficult. So that's what's changed for me.
Those are tremendous changes, I would say, in one lifetime by shifting your attention. That is very, very powerful. Thank you so much for sharing that. That was very inspiring to hear, and a reminder that we all have that capacity. We just have to begin somewhere. And on that note, Jasmine, can you lead us into a somatic practice so we can cultivate this ability a bit further?
Yes, I'd love to. So let's begin wherever you are, and we are in sitting, unless you're standing. You could be in standing, but to perhaps come to sitting, let's do a sitting practice to begin with. And just sitting as you are without shifting anything. Just allowing yourself to arrive. And you may notice that your awareness is elsewhere. And if it is, that's okay. It's to pay attention to what's happening for you in this moment. However you are is good, is fine. And our first practice is to just notice, where is your awareness? What are you noticing or paying attention to? And can you bring your awareness to how comfortable you are in this sitting position? Noticing that. Can you adjust your body to sit in the most comfortable way for you so that there is less stiffness, there is perhaps more space, and adjusting so you could perhaps come to softness and soften any areas of stiffness. So that's the practice to begin with, is just to sit and adjust, to self-adjust to what feels more comfortable or easier. And then to sit in a way that gives you a bit more space in your inner body. And that will happen from within. You might change the position of your feet. You might be leaning back or sitting forward. Whatever that is for you, is to just be curious. Find it for yourself. And then notice when you've adjusted or adjusting, are there any spontaneous breaths that emerge? And if they have, it means that your body's coming to a place of rest. So if you can allow that to happen, it's just to allow yourself to come to a place of rest. And then to find ways of perhaps softening some areas of stiffness, I will give you some guidance here. Can you interlace your fingers and place your hands behind your head, between the neck and the head, and rest your head into your hands, creating a little cradle for your head and your neck, the join between that, just resting. And just allowing that to give your body a bit more comfort, a bit more ease. So you could explore that. You might adjust your head a little. Then to let go of that and to notice if there's any difference. Another practice to bring you a little bit more ease is to place one hand underneath your armpit, let's say your right armpit, and the other hugging your left arm, and just rest. And notice if there's any spontaneous breaths that emerge as you come to rest. So these are all little self-care practices that you can explore. And the last one is to make little fists with your hands, not very tight, just little. And with the ends of your hands, this part, you can fold over and tap your lower back. So just a little tapping sensation. And find any areas of stiffness and really just tap them and notice if there's any change. So you can practice that. So add a bit of tapping. And the purpose of this practice is after you tap or rest, is to notice what happens when you come back into seated. Is there any more space that you found? What's happening for you now? What changes are you noticing? What changes have you noticed within yourself? Okay, so in your standing practice, if you simply arrive in standing, and let's explore this connecting with your body in standing. And can you imagine that your body is a container filled with a gel? So you are a container of gel. How stiff is the gel? And can you find a way to soften the gel? And if not, you could stand upright, just kind of have the sense of standing upright and noticing if there's any tension or how does that change the tension of your body, and then to let go completely. And find the softness in your body and add a little bounce. I call it a soft body bounce. So all you're doing is tuning into your body as the container and adding a little soft body bounce to soften any stiff areas and tuning in to notice where those areas are. And really the purpose of this practice is to bounce out any stiff areas. So continuing with that practice, spending a bit of time there in this soft body bounce. And then there may be an urge from your body to bounce a little more or to come out of that spontaneously. So as you emerge from that, can you add a pandiculation? Just that, you're coming out of that and really find this urge to unwind and to pandiculate and to let go and to arrive and notice where the body takes you. So as you come out of the pandiculation, just to rest. And you may find that the body starts to rock gently from side to side. And then we come to the end of that standing practice. And if you can just add that soft body bounce, that's going to help you to self-soothe or calm the nervous system. It's wonderful for your fascia. Come out of that into pandiculation, and then a release. So I leave you with that today, and thank you for allowing me to guide you.
Thank you for that practice, Jasmine. I feel so revitalized. It's wonderful to give space to listen and then to follow that inner knowing. And Jasmine, now as we're coming to the end of our session, I know that you have offered a bonus as a part of the upgrade package. Could you briefly just say what that is?
Yes, it's an audio practice on the floor. And in that audio practice, it really is a way for you to tune in and follow those principles of resting, finding the floor, and following the guidance from within your body.
Excellent. And where can people find you and your work?
You can go to my website, which is somasensing.org. That's the best way to find me. Or you can go onto Facebook. I have a page, but if you just put my name in, you'll find me. So yeah, those are the ways to connect.
Wonderful. And if you would share a last sentence with the listeners, what would that be?
Tune in. Find the quiet within, and you'll find your inner self. Trust that you already know everything that you need to know, and it's all there. You are whole and complete.
And with those words, I thank you, Jasmine, for this session spent together and for your knowledge and wisdom. And also thank you for everyone who has been listening to this wonderful session together with Jasmine Lambat.
Thank you for joining the Somatic Movement Summit, brought to you by the Shift Network. To learn more, visit somaticmovementsummit.com. To learn more about our global programs, to support you in waking up in all the areas of your life and taking inspired action, visit theshiftnetwork.com. Thank you again for joining us and for sharing this embodied path to vitality and wholeness with your friends and family.